everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports, and I'm really excited to be covering the Houston Rockets and certain things that they could do on the night of the actual NBA draft here in 2022. It's been a great long process. We're just a day away now from the big moment, and I'm so excited for not only the Houston Rockets, but the entire league. The night of the draft is always the most hopeful night of the entire year. If you guys are new to Utility Sports, make sure to hit that subscribe button, or if you've been watching a few of our videos, haven't subscribed yet, it'd be awesome if you could go ahead and click that subscribe button for me. Hit the like button as well if you do enjoy the content you see in today's video. And Rockets fans, let's get into it. You guys are one of the most passionate fan bases, I feel. The comments that you guys leave on my videos are usually really intelligent and shows how much you care about the Rockets. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Here with a video preview, we're going to discuss potential draft fits at picks 3, 17, and 26. Who could the Rockets look to take? We're going to discuss KJ Martin, which is really what fuels this video. I had a comment requesting a Rockets themed video for draft night because of KJ Martin's trade request. We'll talk about how that impacts Houston down the road. Potential trades as well involving picks 17 and 26. Then what I see potentially for Houston going into next season based on who I think they could land in the draft and potential outcomes for this squad that do make some sense. So now, as we look at draft fits, pick number 3 is the easy one, right? They're going to take one of these 3 players. I don't think there's any question about that. And my guess would be the player pictured on the screen here with Paolo Banchero, likely being the 3rd overall selection in the 2022 NBA draft. If you've been staying up to date with my mock drafts here on the channel, you know that last basically month and a half, 2 months, I've been mocking Paolo Banchero 3rd overall. And it's a really good, strong selection because he's a really good, strong player who can do a lot of things with the ball in his hands and is basically the modern 4. You get everything you want with him. He can score the basketball, dribble it. He can play make for others to a certain extent. The only thing really he doesn't do right now at an elite level is defend, which you would think for Houston, a team that gave up 119 points, that's what you want to do. And yes, long term, they need to figure that out, but they've got potential avenues to really grow in that area. Then you look at the other options here, Jabari, Chet. My guess is those 2 go 1 and 2 in either order. My guess is probably in the order I have them listed here, 1 through 3, Jabari 1st, Chet 2nd, and Paolo 3rd. But let's say that, maybe Oklahoma City surprises us, goes with Banchero 2nd. Landing Chet Holmgren is not bad here at all for Houston. I think their preference would be Paolo Banchero, though, and I really do like it for them. It's not a surprise that they traded Christian Wood the day after Paolo Banchero worked out for them privately. Those 2 things are not coincidental. They moved their starting power forward after seeing Banchero in person, up close and personal, and they liked what they saw. He's going to be a Houston Rocket. You can almost book that already. You might as well get your Banchero Rockets jersey ordered right now. So then moving on to 17, this is where things really start to heat up, right? Pick 17 is still a valuable pick in this class. I think this is a very deep class with a ton of talent. So you could be getting a player who is a near lottery level talent or maybe even a lottery level talent at 17. Ousmane Dieng is a great example of that. He's a point forward type with good size, defensive prowess, and he's also somebody who can drive and kick out to others. And he's a pretty good player in terms of the pressure he puts on the rim. I like him as an option here. Or maybe they go athletic with Tari Eason, one of the freak athletes in this class who has some defensive versatility to him. And if you really focus the front court here, Houston could add not 1, but 2 intriguing forward types that could play together fairly well. Tari Eason, he's rather raw offensively, but there's a lot of moments that you're like, wow, this kid is kind of a freak. Kennedy Chandler, Ty Washington, if they do consider the point guard route, that's going to be the biggest question for me on draft night. Do they look at point guard? Does Rafael Stone believe in Kevin Porter Jr. to be the point guard? I know Rockets fans really love KPJ. My question is, how much does Rafael Stone really love KPJ? Is he all in on KPJ being the PG for this roster down the road? And then also Ochai Agbaji, a really safe selection here out of Kansas, someone who's going to be a nice 3-and-D player in his career. You could draft him, slot him at the small forward, whether you want to start him or Jae'Sean Tate, doesn't really matter to me. The whole goal and emphasis there is just getting a little bit more reliability at the small forward spot throughout the course of the 82-game season. And Agbaji really safe in that regard. Those are 5 really good candidates, I think, for pick number 17. Some of them won't be on the board when Houston is selecting, but I feel like at least 2 or 3 of these guys will be, which really gives Houston a good shot at selecting one of these 5. And then we move on to number 26, and here's some interesting options. I think 26 is the hardest one to pin down because they've only had this pick for about a week now at this point. And there's a lot of possibilities that deep in the draft, right? You could look at a guy like Marjan Beauchamp from G League Ignite, who's a very instinctual cutter, puts some pretty good pressure on the rim without the ball in his hands, which I think is valuable, and is an intriguing defensive option with his athletic profile. Trevor Keels, he's going to guard 1 through 3 really well, moves his feet laterally, and he's a strong driver of the basketball with the ball in his hands. Doesn't do as much cutting as Beauchamp does, but is a little bit more proficient with the ball in his hands, actually. Now, his shooting wavered quite a bit this past year for Duke, so I think there's some room for him to grow. He needs to definitely to become a reliable offensive NBA player. But defensively, you like what you see there. Fairly similar to Dylan Brooks, but maybe not quite as big. Ultimately, though, I think his frame does help him with his foot speed play against multiple guards and even some small forwards in this league. Kendall Brown, he's a lengthy defender who's going to be really good in transition. Offensively, he's really raw, but he has a little bit of playmaking feel to him, and he could be a nice connector piece down the road. Houston, the nice thing here is if they go with Banchero and maybe an Ousmane Dieng and at 26A, Kendall Brown, this team's still not going to be good. They're going to lose quite a bit of games. They're going to be young, and that's a good thing. They're going to be in positions to, keep drafting high, add more talent onto this roster. They're going to keep watching and hoping that Brooklyn's terrible, which is a real possibility at this point. And then you look at a guy like Ismail Kamagate. If they want to add another overseas center to work with Alperen Şengün, you go with one with the defensive variety here in Kamagate, who's a quality rim protector, works as a screen and roll guy, athletic around the rim, and just is a smart defensive player. And again, I talked about Houston needing to get better defensively. That is obvious. If by 2027, if the goal is to make the playoffs in that window, you need to get better defensively. There's no question about that. Kamagate would be a huge improvement for them. They gave up 119 points a game this past year. They need to get more proficient on that end of the floor. We'll see if they're capable of doing that. And the pressure is not on year 1 here to do that. The pressure is on by year 3, 4 to get better in that area. If every single player takes incremental steps to improve, and you add a couple defensive specialists like a Kamagate, that could really help as well. And now let's look at KJ Martin. He reportedly would like out of Houston and would like a trade from the Houston Rockets to another team. And I would have to guess this has to do with a role, because I think he kind of sees the writing on the wall here. They have another top selection, probably going to take Paolo Banchero. And KJ Martin, who's been playing about 21, 22 minutes a night, probably doesn't get an expanded role outside of that. They've been starting Jae'Sean Tate over him, which I think is the right move. And trading KJ Martin is perfectly fine. I understand that he's shown flashes and he's highly athletic and a fun transition player. Ultimately, the KJ Martins of the world aren't really what swing your franchise. So if you can get extra value from him on draft night, trading him, including him in some trades, that is a genius move to do. Because again, let's say you get to playoff basketball 3-4 years from now, is KJ Martin really going to be on the floor for Houston in playoff games? I don't think so. I don't think that KJ Martin's a playoff player to a certain extent. I think maybe he could play in a very niche role in certain playoff situations, but he's not going to be someone who plays 20 minutes a night in a playoff series. That's just not going to happen. So you're perfectly fine trading him away. I know he's only 21 years old. He's young, has room to improve, but I'm going to sell on KJ Martin stock right now simply because I think he's played pretty well. He's been fairly efficient, but I would not bet on him being a key contributor on a postseason team. So now let's go on to some potential trades. And trade number 1 here, I've got the Cleveland Cavaliers moving down from pick number 14, which has been rumored vastly throughout the league. There's been a lot of reports that Cleveland could look to move down, and it makes sense from Cleveland's perspective. With some of the contracts they're about to have to ink, they're going to want some players on cheap rookie contracts. And for Houston, the goal here is to move up and get a guy that you really like, whether that's a Mark Williams, Ousmane Dieng. If you're worried he might go 15th to Charlotte or 16th to Atlanta, you have to maybe be aggressive moving up. And if it comes at the cost of pick 26, that's perfectly fine. Houston took multiple players in the first round last year. They don't need to add 3 rookies to this roster. If you can add 2 quality rookies and a Paolo Banchero and whoever you would take at 14, that should be the goal here. This gives Rafael Stone flexibility in moving up in the draft, finding a guy that he's really in love with, that he thinks, if we don't get him, I'm going to be pretty disappointed by the end of draft night. That's really the goal here. I know the value maybe feels a little rich here from what Houston's giving up, but don't think of it just as pick value. think about it as the specific player that Rafael Stone would want. And he's done a good job giving himself flexibility in years past, whether it's moving up or moving back. He is someone who is going to be aggressive as a GM, and I like that. That's a good quality to have when you're a GM, because if you believe in something, you believe in a player, you don't want to just sit around and say, okay, that's what we're going to do, because sometimes that player ends up hitting and there's reports that you were interested, but if you don't get the deal done and you don't draft the player you want, feels pretty bad by the end of the night and by the end of that player's career, especially if they go on to find success. And that might be the case for a Mark Williams or an Ousmane Dieng or a Tari Eason if that's who they want at 14. So they should be aggressive. They should look to go get guys, add more talent to this roster. And even though the value feels rich here, ultimately, if the player you take at 14 wouldn't be there for you at 17, it's well worth that type of move, especially if that player ends up playing well. Then trade idea number 2 here, we got the Portland Trailblazers involved now. So here the Blazers would receive picks number 17, number 26, Eric Gordon, and KJ Martin. And the big thing here for Portland, they have a trade exception, so they wouldn't even have to send out any players. And you could get 2 guys who you could consider rotation players, at least throughout the regular season for the squad. Eric Gordon would probably function in a bench role as a bench scoring spark plug for that team. And KJ Martin would give them a little bit more athleticism off the bench as well at the wing spot behind some of their other players like Nasir Little and Josh Hart, which maybe doesn't feel like the best thing, but they also get 2 first-round picks in this to move down from number 7, where Houston would then be in position to have 2 top 7 picks in this draft, which I think is a really underrated thing to have. When you have 2 picks in the top 7, it's very likely that you at least hit on one of them. And the fact that we likely know that Banchero is a Rocket at this point means you're probably going to hit on 2 of them, because Banchero right now, I'm already telling you, he's a hit. That's a no-brainer selection. In other classes, he might be the 1st or 2nd overall selection. This year, he's going 3rd, more than likely, and Houston's getting a really good player there. And at 7, maybe they come back and grab a Jalen Duren or a Benedict Mathurin or one of these guys that I'm confident in as well. And then Houston feels really good about their end scenario in getting 2 of the top 7 players in the class, arguably. And you'd have to be pretty happy about that as a Rockets fan. Yes, it does cost you Gordon and KJ Martin and 2 firsts. But again, if the player you take at 7 is better than anyone available at 17, I feel like that's a no-brainer, especially for the Rockets who already have so many young players. The idea here isn't adding depth for Houston. It's about adding quality. And the quality at 7 is just much higher than what you're going to likely get at 17. Yes, there's players who work out at 17, but those are fewer and farther between than they are at the pick number 7. Then we go on to trade idea number 3. And this one's more of a generic trade idea, not specifically centered on any one team, because I don't really know which teams are going to be trying to jump back up into the first round, whether they want to move up from outside the first round or from a different spot in round 1. And that's the option here that Houston has of giving themselves more future flexibility. You trade either pick 17 or pick number 26. They could even do both if they really wanted to, but I think they probably used 2 first-round selections this year. They trade the other one potentially out of the first round to a later draft year, which gives them more flexibility to involve that pick in future trades. Say at the trade deadline, there's a young player that becomes somewhat available for a team that's trying to win now, and maybe you can attach an Eric Gordon with that later, and you can try and make some moves to move up for a guy, get whoever you want. It just gives you more flexibility. The best teams in the league always have the ability to pivot and change what they're looking for and what they're doing based on what they've most recently seen. And I think a move like this would give Houston a little bit more of that pivotability, which is not a word, but I'm going to make it a word right now. The ability to pivot, I think, is going to be huge for Rafael Stone in Houston, especially as we kind of see more of what we get from, Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün. And I think the biggest question is Usman Garuba. What are we going to see from him with KJ Martin likely out? That opens the door for more Garuba minutes, which I'm really excited about. I love that kid coming out of Real Madrid. I think he's someone who his defensive intangibles are there. Offensively now, he's a little rusty, a little raw. I'm not sure exactly what he's going to be on that end of the floor quite yet, but that's not what you need in Houston. You need more defense, and Usman Garuba might be able to play into that. He's kind of like a Swiss Army knife, but since he played in Real Madrid, maybe the Spanish Army knife. We'll see exactly what he can do for the Rockets over the next coming seasons. I'm excited for this Rockets team, though. They've got young talent. They've got good draft position. They're going to make some good decisions. They're going to make some good moves, and I think they're going to be in a spot to really excel and succeed moving forward, which I love for this Rockets franchise. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you did enjoy today's video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more. Comment Rockets draft night. If you made it to this part of the video, it lets me know that I'm doing a good job and that you did enjoy the video. Again, smash that like button. Check us out on Twitter, links in the description. And until next time, we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.